Counting this in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live chat right here on naacpconnect.org. I'm Larry Brown, Jr., Manager at NAACP Connect here in the Digital Media Department. And we do thank you for joining us. We do apologize for the delay. We had a few internet connectivity issues. I'm assuming that everyone is all abuzz on the SCOTUS decision that was delivered today, which, by the way, we will be covering tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. right here on NAACP Connect. Let's go ahead and talk about today. Remember, if you're chatting with us, you can always tweet your questions throughout the chat to @NAACP Connect, or you can use the hashtag death penalty, all one word, DEATHPENALTY, to send us your questions to be asked live here on the air. 2/3 of the world's countries have abolished the death penalty. The United States remains one of the top 5 countries with the largest amount of executions per year. After the recent victory in Maryland and close defeat in Delaware, the movement to abolish the death penalty has begun to gain some momentum. Now, although we're headed in the right direction, there are still 32 states that practice the death penalty. There are still staggering numbers that make us question the validity and the practice of capital punishment. Today, we are discussing the movement to abolish the death penalty in America. Joining me is Dr. Niaz Khosravi. She is the director of the NAACP Criminal Justice Department. Niaz, want to say hello so we can get you in the screen?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be with you all, and thanks for joining.
Next, we have Brian Evans from Amnesty International. He's the acting director of the Death Penalty Abolition Campaign. How are you, Brian?
Pretty good. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining.
And Kirk Bloodsworth. Kirk is a death row exoneree and advocacy director with Witness to Innocence. Kirk, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Let's go ahead and get started. Niaz, can you give us a history of the death penalty and how do we get where we are today?
So, you know, the death penalty has been practiced in one form or another since the inception of this country. And, you know, the abolition movement has been trying to abolish it for as long as I can remember being a part of this movement. And maybe Brian has a history of when, and Kirk maybe, when the abolition movement started. But I can speak to the NAACP participation over the last few years in the death penalty and how we've really made sure that the African American community and the people of color in general are part of this movement to abolish the death penalty in this country. And so we've had, as an association, a long-standing commitment to abolish the death penalty. And I think our involvement with our partners around the Troy Davis campaign really took that commitment to a new level for us and showed the importance and the important role that communities of color can play and need to play in this movement. And we were able to, as a group, really garner national attention and international attention to this, you know, very important issue in a way that we hadn't seen before, right? And so quickly after that, and seeing, of course, we weren't able to save the life of Troy Davis, but as we promised to him, we would use the tragedy of his death to really push forward with our work to abolish the movement in this country. And we pivoted very quickly in supporting our leadership in the state of Connecticut to abolish the death penalty there. And then really in a very major way in the campaign in Maryland to abolish the death penalty, and really bringing the African American community into the fold, because it is, as all, you know, criminal justice issues, it is one that has a disparate impact on people of color. And so we were able to, with our partners, again, play a role in ensuring that Maryland became the 18th state to abolish the death penalty in the U.S. And I'm going to, you know, stop there, but there's a lot to be said about, you know, where the movement is going and how we can finally eradicate this practice in this nation as a whole.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me get Brian to chime in here. Brian, speak a little bit about your work at Amnesty and what Amnesty is doing in conjunction with associations like us here at the NAACP to really make sure that there is a united front in this movement.
Absolutely. Amnesty started working against the death penalty in 1977, which was also not coincidentally the year the United States restarted executions. And we've been working with all our coalition partners, whether it's NAACP or ACLU or the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, to build a sort of grassroots base that will support abolition in every state. And at the turn of this century, around the year 2000, when all the exonerations in Illinois came out, we started to see that bear fruit, and we started to see states' death sentences declining, we started to see executions declining, and then we started to see states abolish the death penalty, starting with New Jersey in 2007 and then culminating with Maryland this year, and hopefully Delaware or New Hampshire next year. We've been involved the whole way, and as you've said, Niaz, with the Troy Davis case and cases like that, this is something Amnesty International has done since 1961, is try to put a human face on a human rights issue. And with the Troy Davis case, with his powerful family and his powerful advocacy for himself, he was his strongest advocate, and the drama of having survived several execution dates, it really built to a critical mass. And we're not going back to the days before Troy Davis. Since his execution, the days after his execution, I know that state coalitions around the country got thousands and thousands of people emailing saying, I want to get involved, including out in California, where we had a very close vote for abolition out there. So this coalition work is absolutely critical to bring the critical mass we need to abolish the death penalty. And working in the states is one aspect, but working on cases of people like Troy Davis or like Reginald Clemens, who's facing execution in Missouri right now, despite police brutality and police misconduct, those kind of cases really bring new people to the movement, and it opens their eyes to what's really going on in this country.
Brian, you mentioned actually putting one of the strategies with this kind of movement is actually putting a face to a human rights issue. And we are very unfortunately, we're unable to have our brother Troy Davis with us today. We do know that Troy was murdered by the state of Georgia. And as Niaz stated, we promised him that we would work to end the death penalty in this country. However, we're very fortunate to have with us an exoneree from death row, Kirk. Kirk, can you please share your story, what happened, and how you got to where you are today?
In 1984, I was an honorably discharged Marine, never been arrested for anything in my life, and I found myself sitting in front of a judge one summer morning. As a matter of fact, this Friday marks my 20th year anniversary of being free. So
congratulations.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, but in 1984, I had no idea. I never knew the death penalty would affect me as a human being. I was an honorably discharged Marine, no criminal record, no criminal history. I'm not going to sit here and say I was an angel, but I knew one thing: I was accused of one of the most brutal crimes in Maryland's history, based on witness identification, and prosecutorial misconduct happened, and people withholding evidence about another suspect. And just let me just say that the description of the last person seen with Dawn Hamilton was the little girl that was found murdered in Baltimore County back in 1984, in July of that year. They said he was 6'5", curly blonde hair, bushy mustache, tan skin, and skinny. Well, if I wish I could stand up and give you a full view, but I'm like 6 foot tall. My hair was as red as a fire plug back in those days, and I had sideburns that reached almost down to here. And, in the end, the real killer turned out to be 5'6" and 160 pounds. We cannot any longer rely upon a system to have a death sentence that could make it so terrible and so wrong that for people that could be executed. I learned this literally, it was 28 years ago when all this was coming to me, almost 29 now. The death penalty has no place in America, and I was happy as I could possibly say that Maryland is now, along with the long line of people who have abolished the death penalty, the state that almost killed me. And, I think people like Niaz and Brian and I, we just put our best foot forward and killed the thing that almost killed me. And
Yes.
I'm happy to say that I'm the first exoneree from the state of Maryland and the last.
That's right.
From death row. So unless something miraculously happens with one of these other fellows, but I definitely think it's time the death penalty goes nationwide ever again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we salute you, Kirk. We salute you. Congratulations on 20 years. Congratulations on the victory in Maryland being the first and the last. That's absolutely amazing. Let's rewind a little bit to earlier this year when the governor actually, when Maryland actually abolished the death penalty. Tell me about what was going through your mind leading up to that day, and once we finally realized that it would happen and Maryland would make history. What was that like for you?
I have to say that it was probably one of the, and we were all sitting in the same spots, and Niaz and Brian and all of us were kind of like congregated in the, up in the gallery of the Senate and the House, and in this big, big group of people that we've known each other for many years, and we worked together, and I was lucky enough that. On one side of me, Ben Jealous was sitting on one side of me, and of course I had Vicky Schieber, murder victims family member, sitting on the other, and me, of course, in the middle, and then my good friend and colleague Suja Graham sitting down at the other end. We were just bookends to the truth that, witness to innocence is like a unique group of people. I mean, we have all our members and a third of our board and a good portion of our staff are death row survivors. There is 142 exonerated death row survivors in the United States, and that's enough to give anybody pause. I mean, that's not even a third of how many that Governor Perry has executed. I mean, I just find this very bizarre that we still continue this practice, knowing all this information. But when the vote happened and finally we knew we won, I felt like I had been in a fight with Mike Tyson or something. I was just so wore out and wiped out, and but it's been a great day, and it's not just my story is unique. It's all the other ones that Witness to Innocence has conveyed over the last 10 years. We march on to the next place and try to end it throughout this world. From talking to people in Europe and crossing the pond and telling them what innocence is all about.
And Larry, if I could chime in.
Yes. Sure.
I have to say, the day you're asking about was just such a powerful, I think, moment in the abolition movement history, but certainly in Maryland's history. And as Kirk describes for you, we were all sitting on this balcony level watching the legislature vote, and we were up there. I was right behind Kirk and Suja, and I have to tell you, watching these two men watch what happened that day in Maryland was probably one of the most powerful moments that I've ever been a part of, and probably an image and a moment that I will never forget. And I think that it's really important, as you said, to put a human face to this brutal practice, because not only, and we can talk about all the issues, not only is it not effective as a policy, not only does it cost more than life in prison, not only is it not a deterrent, but it also, not only is it racially discriminatory, right, but it also, I think, risks innocent lives, which is, I think, probably the saddest of the consequences of this policy. And so it's really just an honor to be able to work with people like Kirk and have him really lend his voice so that we can move forward to abolish the death penalty in this country.
And I think
absolutely.
when I was there, my observation, in addition to what they're talking about, is Kirk mentioned Vicky Schieber, and there were a couple other people who lost loved ones to murder. And this is a big change in the last few years, is that murder victims' families are speaking out, saying the death penalty is not helping us, it's actually hurting us. And in the House, there were 2 or 3 delegates who actually pointed up to us in the balcony, mentioned some victim family members by name, and said, I am changing my vote because of these folks, and I realize the death penalty is not helping anybody anymore. And to
like
me, that was
Spikes, you know.
Bonita, exactly, yeah, exactly, and that just and we watched in the House as we expected a certain number of votes. We got like 7 more votes than we thought we were going to get. It was really snowballing, and I think it's just having been part of this since I started working at Embassy in 2007. When we thought we were going to get it right away because O'Malley had been elected, and it took 6 years despite having a governor on our side and a legislature on our side. It's hard to change the status quo, and just all the different groups and people like Kirk, people like Vicky, it takes all of them. And just seeing that come to fruition was just a great, great feeling, and hopefully we'll experience again soon in other states.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you all want to check out photos from that from the day that Governor O'Malley actually signed the legislation, I actually just tweeted that link. If you follow me on Twitter at Larry Brown Jr., you can see the photos from the NAACP page there. We'll make sure that we retweet that from our NAACP Connect account. Niaz, I want to go back to you. You mentioned in your last comment that the death penalty has some discriminatory practices. Speak a little bit about that and help us raise the awareness. Oftentimes, people see the death penalty as capital punishment, and they don't really delve deeper to figure out what it is that's actually going on beneath the surface. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's just a lot of misinformation and misconception out there about the death penalty. One, I think fact that we all need to recognize, and as the NAACP, I think it's very important for us to educate our community and our constituents about all the facts. But one is the racially disparate impact that the death penalty has, not only on the likelihood of somebody to receive the death penalty, but more closely linked to the race of the victim. So you're more likely to get the death penalty in a death sentence if your victim is white, versus if your victim is African American or another person of color, right? So there's facts out there that vary from state to state, but by and large, that is the trend across the board. And of course, death penalty is also, getting the death penalty is also linked to your socioeconomic status, right? How good an attorney you can get often determines what type of trial you're going to get, what type of defense you're going to get, and what sentence you're going to get, right? On top of that, there's a myth out there that the death penalty is a deterrent to crime. When you look at the statistics, however, you see that in all the states that, on average, amongst the states that have abolished the death penalty, the crime rate is actually lower. There's no direct link, and I think there was a survey of police chiefs several years ago, and a majority of them said that they can't say that the death penalty is an actual deterrent, right? So it doesn't work, it's racially discriminatory, it's discriminatory based on socioeconomic standing, and it's also more costly, right? Again, the cost varies from state to state. On average, it costs roughly about 3 times more to sentence somebody to death than to put them in prison for the rest of their lives, right? So you take that all together and you add on top of it that we then also risk killing innocent people, like, God forbid, a Kirk Bloodsworth or a Sujit Graham, or, the 142 other people who are in that same spot who, but for the grace of God, were able to prove their innocence, right? Who knows how many people have been put to death, including Troy, who did not have the luxury of having the evidence or the circumstances to allow for their exoneration. So it just makes no sense as a policy for this country, and I think that the only purpose that it serves is that of retribution and vengeance, which I think is you have a flawed policy if that's all that your criminal justice system is serving.
Yeah, if I could.
Absolutely, Brian. I think you'd like to reply as well. I
Yeah,
saw you itching
yeah.
to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the death penalty is pretty much a direct descendant of lynching. If you look at where executions take place, it's mostly in the Old South, and you can trace sort of slavery to lynching to capital punishment. There's a direct line. And so race is always intertwined with the death penalty. And as Niaz mentioned, the race of the victim is so important now, and that's a reflection of what the powers that be in a society, who's valuable as a victim. It's the wealthy white judge, not the poor African-American drug dealer who gets murdered. So you see these racial disparities in terms of the victim. And one of the interesting things that's happening now, and I'm talking about Texas, as death sentences have declined in Texas, we're seeing more racial disparity. Last year there were only 9 death sentences in Texas. 7 of them were African-American and 1 was Latino. There have been 7 executions in Texas. The 8th is scheduled for Wednesday. If that one is carried out, 7 of the 8 will have been African American. So as the death penalty is being used less, it seems like it's being used less on white people than on people of color, at least for the moment. And just an addendum to that, the execution in Texas on Wednesday will be the 500th in Texas since they started executing people again in 1982. Which is a pretty horrific milestone that we all have to sort of acknowledge. Even though things are slowing down, racial bias or racial disparities are sort of becoming more apparent, and states like Texas are continuing to execute people.
You know, Larry, I just want to say real quickly that, and Niaz was right. I mean, it's just those who have the capital don't get capital punishment. I mean, that's a fact. It's been like that for years, and it's so, I sat on the commission with the governor, Martin O'Malley, and discovered a lot of things that I kind of suspected, but were really proven to me when I sat on that commission. And it was amazing, that since the 60s, we've had asked for the abolishment of the death penalty in the state of Maryland long ago. I mean, there's been several commissions. We reinstated in 1978, and I think the people had just had enough. The death penalty hadn't protected them whatsoever, and it's a racial policy, and we need to get rid of it, not along with what it can do to an innocent person.
Absolutely. Just for everyone's record, statistics show that since 1977, the overwhelmingly majority of death row defendants, 77%, have been executed for killing white victims. That kind of goes back to what Kirk was saying. It goes to the individuals who have the capital, and it's really shows the huge disparity between those who are on death row versus those who never even make it to death row.
Right.
I want to ask you. I want Brian. You're going to say something?
No, okay.
Okay. Well, I actually want to go to you, Brian. Talk a little bit about why it's important for people to see the death penalty as a human rights issue. So many times people say, well, you know what, I support the death penalty because I think it's wrong to take another person's life. Or I think I support the death penalty because I agree that if you do wrong, let's use that. If you do wrong, then this crime should be punishable by death. Speak a bit about why this really is a human rights issue.
Well, human rights are about limiting the power of the government over its citizens. At the end of the day, if you can't limit the government's power, you have no rights. And there's no greater power a government has than the power to kill somebody. There are certain, in wartime, there's certain, instances where killing a human being is not a human rights violation. But once somebody's taken prisoner and under the control, killing them is the most fundamental human rights violation of all, because it's the most fundamental abuse of government power. If you should not and cannot, and there's conventions against torturing a prisoner, certainly you cannot kill a prisoner. So it's a fundamental human rights violation in that respect, that it's just the ultimate exercise or the ultimate abuse of government power against its own citizens.
Kirk, tell us how we can find out more stories of individuals like yourself who are innocent, who have nothing to do with the crime they're being punished for. How can we find out information to identify faces to these stories?
Well, you can certainly come on to witnessedinnocence.org, and we have several stories on our website of all of our members. Suja Graham is on there as well, and myself and several others, and just kind of like you know, go through all of them, and then if you need some more, certainly the Death Penalty Information Center has quite a few. They have all 142 exonerated death row survivors on the website, but witnessedinnocence.org, and check us out. And you know, I tell people all the time that, you know, I get a lot of attention about my case, but my story is not unique. You know, within a couple steps away from me was a man from California who almost died in California's gas chamber. That was Suja Graham, and he lives right in Tacoma Park. You know, it's obvious that innocent people are convicted every year, and I mean, I think one of the greatest things, or one of the worst things that can happen to each of us as a society, is to execute its own citizens, let alone to say that they might be innocent, and whether they be white, black, or whatever, you know, poor or rich, or doesn't matter. We need to stop this thing that can kill its own people.
Brian, I want to actually go back. Let's go to Niaz. I'm sorry. Niaz, to speak a bit about the work of the NAACP long term. The NAACP, we've got a strategic plan that we rolled out at the top of 2012, which is called our Game Changers, where the NAACP said, look, we've been around for over 100 years, and we've changed the game for over a century. We've changed the very social fabric of America. And here's what our plan is for the next century of the NAACP. One of those areas that we identified was criminal justice. Speak about our criminal justice game changer and how the death penalty plays a role in our long-term plan and changing the fabric of America.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. I want to just, before we get too far away from a point that Kirk made, I mean, when he was talking about being on this commission with in Maryland, right? And talking about how, with, you know, if you have capital, you don't get capital punishment. That's absolutely right. You have, I think the statistics are, and correct me if I'm wrong, that 95% of the people who are on death row couldn't afford their own attorney. I mean, what does that tell you? You
That's
know?
right.
And when you look at particular states, and I think across the country, you see that, in fact, the majority of crime victims and victims of violence in this country are African Americans, right? And yet people who sit on death row, and murder victims are African American, and yet the people who sit on death row are there, more likely than not, are there for killing a white person. So it certainly goes to speaking to the fact, you know, how is someone's life viewed in this criminal justice system. And as you said, Larry, to the point in the question that you were asking about the game changer, I mean, the reason that criminal justice is one of our 5 game changers at the NAACP for this century is that when you look at the criminal justice system, there is a racially disparate impact all the way from the beginning, right, from contact with law enforcement, which is now starting at earlier and earlier ages, right? In schools, you got the school-to-prison pipeline and kids being sent away in handcuffs for doodling on their desk, right? So all the way from contact with police to who is then arrested, what they are charged with, how long a sentence they get, all the way to who gets the death penalty, right? So this is why this is an important issue for the NAACP. We, right now, as a country, lead the world in our incarceration rates, right? We have 5% of the world population as a country and 25% of its prisoners. And most of those people are people of color, 2/3 in fact, right? African Americans, roughly 13% of the U.S. population, nearly 40% of people in our prisons and jails. So this is why criminal justice is a game changer for the NAACP. And it addresses everything from racial profiling and law enforcement accountability to mass incarceration and the disproportionate rate of people of color and African Americans in our prison system, as well as part of that game changer is to end the death penalty. And as we talked about earlier, this movement really needs to be a cohesive movement amongst everybody, amongst people of color, as well as crime or murder victim families who are now recognizing that the death penalty does no good, right? Doesn't bring their loved ones back. It doesn't fill the void, and it takes years to actually convict the right person, if you're even able to do that, right? So our campaign that we rolled out has really been something that we've worked on with people at Amnesty and at Witness to Innocence and others in the EJ USA and our other NCADP and our other allies to really look at how we can once and for all abolish the death penalty in this country as a whole. We've done it before for certain categories, right? We've done it for we've abolished the death penalty for juveniles in this country. We've abolished the death penalty for people with mental handicaps. And there has been a system, right, a campaign plan that has worked. And so we use that as a framework. And the way it's really a state-by-state movement. We work with our partners and try to get the majority of states in the country to abolish the death penalty, right? And once you reach the critical mass of states, which is 26 or more, you can, go before the Supreme Court as we've done in the past, and with juveniles and with people who have mental handicaps, and argue that this punishment is not only cruel, it's also unusual, and it goes against our evolving standards of decency. And so that's the campaign plan, and it's the reason that it's very state-based work is because we need to get to that critical mass of 26 plus states. And the goal is, and I'm sure Kirk and Brian can speak to this as well, the goal really is to get there by 2025. So we need everybody to get involved in this movement.
Absolutely. One of the greatest ways I recall people getting involved was in 2011. We've talked about Troy Davis earlier in the discussion, but I remember vividly the day that the NAACP, with coalition partners of Amnesty International and many other associations, we teamed up. And we said, what can we do to unite our efforts to really save our brother Troy Davis? And we came up with the hashtag Too Much Doubt. Too Much Doubt ended up being the hashtag that was most used in the entire in 2011, right up under Beyonce's pregnancy. I mean, we had everyone from Kim Kardashian tweeting about the Too Much Doubt. We had the Pope tweeting about Too Much Doubt. We had Russell Simmons tweeting about Too Much Doubt. Brian, talk about the importance of leveraging what tools that we have that are easy resources for folks. I mean, Beyonce said that we have a plan to have this the death penalty abolished by 2026. Talk about the importance of using our resources that are free to us to use.
Yeah, I mean that was huge for the Troy Davis campaign, and there was a lot of negotiations behind the scenes leading up to that to get Russell Simmons on board and things like that, which is key to being successful. You don't just send a tweet out and hope Russell Simmons retweets it. That was huge at going from 10,000 people to 1 million people. It just explodes exponentially. And we saw when we were even the House or the Senate during one of the debates in Maryland, the hashtag MD repeal trended. It was a Wednesday night, so I guess not much was going on. But we found that what it does is it allows everybody in the death penalty abolition movement to follow, like you're live tweeting a hearing or a debate. Everybody can follow it. You can watch it on your computer, and you can watch the tweets as it's going on. And so people who are in Nebraska pushing their own bill, or people who are in Texas and not pushing a bill quite yet, but trying to get some hope out of the situation, it just really it has a great social bonding effect for the people in our movement, and I think people sort of watching want to get in on that, and so that actually helps bring in more people. It really has it's a great multiplier, particularly Twitter, but it does take quite a bit of pre-planning and organizing. We spent 2 years building up sort of a critical mass of a list before 2013 came along. The coalition. Before we really had enough people so that it could really go off the way it did. But no, absolutely, it's an easy way for people to put their toe in the water and start to get involved, and we need to do as much of that as we can.
Absolutely. Kurt, do you have any resources that people can use to get involved aside from the buzz and social media?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the messages from all these men and women throughout the United States. I mean, you have people like Suja Graham and myself and others, Ray Crone, Ron Kiney, You just can't say enough. And Juan Melendez, and just the list just keeps going and going. Joe D'Ambrosio, and just one right after another. And this, I realized a long time ago, and it takes a great amount of people. I mean, I don't think any one person can necessarily give any abolition state victory necessarily. It was a combined effort upon all of us. And, I tell you what, I stuck my face out in front of them guys so much that I think they almost did it just to get rid of me. But it was like, it's one of those type of deals where you have to just kind of stay and keep fighting, even when you might think you might be losing. We've had years where we felt whipped after the commission and so forth, but I kept sticking my hand out, and I kept telling people a story, and I kept passing my book out and kept telling the people about the other men and women that I've mentioned, and Witnessed Innocence has been there every single time. You can't say enough about our members and our staff and some of the men and women that have endured this. And having said, I know full well what it's like to sit up on a stage or sit up in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and be analyzed by all these senators and politicians about your life. And my story was certainly something that, but I talk right back to them, not in a bad way, but it's telling them that, this is the mistake that they could make and that we might not be able to pull it back. That's the resources. Witnessed Innocence is the best way to make everyone in the country a witnessed innocence.
Wonderful, wonderful words. I like to go to all of our panelists and be respectful of everyone's time. We've got some other commitments after this chat, but I want to ask for final thoughts. Brian, any final thoughts on the discussion today? Well, this is not the end. We're definitely going to continue. Just wrapping today.
I was interested to hear the discussion from Niaz about the larger criminal justice, because ultimately the death penalty is kind of like the canary in the coal mine or the tip of the iceberg or whatever metaphor you want to. It's got the racial bias, it's diverse resources. It's sort of symbolic of the whole wrong approach we have to criminal justice. What we do is we focus on punishment rather than prevention. We waste all this money, and we allow it, and because we do it that way, our racial biases are in full flame. And for us, what we want to do is build a human rights culture in the United States, and that's a culture where we don't focus on punishment as a solution to problems, but rather we divert our resources and towards things like education, healthcare, that will prevent crimes, that will build communities. And so abolishing the death penalty is an important symbolic piece of that, because it's the biggest, worst, baddest part of the criminal justice system. But it's only part. I mean, we have solitary confinement, which we consider to be torture, all over this country. No other country puts people in solitary confinement the way we do. So there's a lot of criminal justice issues. Abolishing the death penalty is great, but if we want to keep it sustainable, we need to change the way people think about punishment, yes, that it doesn't need to be harsh and vindictive and hateful. We need to protect society from certain people, but we need to focus on building communities, not warehousing people and hurting them as much as we can.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Niaz, how about you?
Well, I think a couple of final thoughts here, right? I think, number one, sometimes we're painted as, oh, we're soft on crime, or we want to let people get away with murder. That's not the case, and I think nobody should stand for that argument, right? We are talking about putting people away for the rest of their lives, right? And at the same time, so taking them off the streets for good without the possibility of parole, but at the same time not risking killing an innocent person, right? At the same time saving enough money so that we can actually help out murder victim families and support them, because it's a financial and emotional and every other kind of burden you can think of if you go through that pain, right? We can actually use that money to boost law enforcement efforts, to make sure that more murders are being solved, more rapes are being solved, that the community is actually safer. We've done all of this get tough on crime we've pushed all these policies over the last 3 decades, and it's gotten us nowhere. We have not really begun to put a major dent the way we should have on public safety, on crime and increased public safety in this country. And I think it's just really important, finally, for the NAACP and our membership, and particularly our youth, to get involved in this movement, not only to reform the criminal justice system, but also in this movement to abolish the death penalty. We have such an important role to play, as does everybody else and all of our allies in this movement. But you know, we really have not been engaged as we should have over the last few decades, and I think it's time that we really took up the mantle and began to do the education and the advocacy that's needed. And it's not easy, you know, creating social change never is, but this is the business we're in, and we know that it's possible. So, you know, all we need is really to work together on it, and I'm just really honored to be on this panel with all of our guests here today, and I hope that it's just the beginning.
Excellent. Thanks, Niaz. Kirk, how about you?
Well, I have to just intone what Niaz said, and Brian, this is a combined effort. You know, Witness to Innocence stands arm in arm with the NAACP and Amnesty International and all our coalition partners. I have to say that, you know, we can do this together, and we need to fight as one cohesive unit of folks. I'm an old Marine, so I look at it like that. You know, Brian was correct, and Niaz both, about the criminal justice system, the broader reach within the criminal justice system. I mean, for land's sakes, you know, you still have jurisdictions in this country that would give the death sentence away for circumstantial evidence. I mean, I find this so bizarre and so unrealistic that our system has turned to this way. I stand ready in any state, in any part of the world, to fight against the death penalty with both of my colleagues on this panel, and their leadership and everything is very important. And this is the way we can make everyone in this world and in this country witnesses to innocence.
Wonderful. Thank you for your final thoughts, Kirk, and thank you all for tuning in today. I think Kirk said it best, where he said, stay and keep fighting, even when it looks like you're losing. You never know whose life you're going to change and whose life you're going to touch. Brian Evans, thank you so much from Amnesty International. Kirk Bloodsworth from Witness to Innocence, and Dr. Niaz Khosravi right here at the NAACP. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. right here on NAACPconnect.org, we will analyze and break down the Supreme Court's decision on the Voting Rights Act. Tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You do not want to miss it. It is extremely important that you tune in and join us for tomorrow's chat. You will get your marching orders. You'll see how it affects our history and how it will affect our future. It's very important that you tune in. Special thanks to Eric Wingerter, Vice President of the Communications and Digital Media Department here at the Association, our Chairman of the Board, Rosalind Brock, and our President and CEO, Benjamin Todd Jellis, for providing this platform for us. We also want to give a special shout out to Mr. Paul McFarlane for producing this live hangout. Thank you so much, Paul, and to you for watching. Thank you so much. You can get updates from NAACP by texting NAACP to 62227. That's NAACP to 62227. We'll see you tomorrow at 11:30. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.